These are the 17th century cobblestone roads of northern France. When first laid down, they shored up the armies of Napoleon. And now, these ugly artifacts support the wagons and machinery of beet farmers and men who race bicycles. Every year they return and begin this, the greatest single-day bike race in the world, as a multicolored swarm brushing a countryside canvas with pastels of speed and athletic perfection. The finest professional bike racers in the world, who for one long day borrow these forgotten roads and make them their playing field. The nightmarish weather of northern France releases the demons of springtime. More than 150 will start, but only a handful will finish. The men, machines, and mechanics locked in a struggle over terrain and in weather not fit for man or beast. These are the men who come to win a race that will tease and torture them until it finds a champion. This is the madness of racing bicycles over cobblestones for 8 hours. This is Paris-Roubaix. They are the mud-covered pathways stacked with ancient stones of all shapes and sizes. These are the cobblestones of northern France. They're almost impossible to even stand on. Imagine racing bicycles over them. Well, they've been doing just that since the year 1896 here in France. I'm John Tesh, and today it's our pleasure here at CBS Sports to bring you the greatest single-day bicycle race in the world. The French call it l'Enfer du Nord, which means the hell of the north. It's exciting, it is fascinating, and it's a piece of history, as my colleague, British cyclist Phil Liggett, now tells us.
19 years after the first race, many of the riders were fighting an even greater battle, one for their lives and their freedom. The flat landscape of the Franco-Belge border was a crucial World War I battlefront. If that wasn't enough fighting, it was repeated again in World War II. It was a place where young men, those who returned, became heroes.
Been a strategic point in world wars, and simply the war is still here. These bunkers, for example, sitting here in the middle of the field. And those roads that John showed you, well, they were built by Napoleon, and there's a guy who's done plenty of walking around France. But now, of course, it's a battle of a different kind. It's still man against man, but it's also man against the elements. And that's why Paris-Roubaix now is the toughest single-day classic in the world. 40 years ago, the resistance fighters crossed these fields. They still do. But now as old men, to watch the cyclists go by and perhaps even cheer a German to victory. Maybe a Frenchman, maybe an American. They'd certainly like it to be a Frenchman because they've only won this race once in 25 years.
France's hero in 1981 was Bernard Hinault, the Badger, a tough, handsome Breton who won the race so he could tell the world about the dangers to a professional rider. And at the same time, why he'd never again visit hell. He'll spend race day at home.
I think that Paris-Roubaix is a very different race. I have a wife and 2 children, so I don't want my skin ripped off.
And a tumble onto cobblestones will do just that.
Watch the left of your screen. American Jonathan Boyer riding Paris-Roubaix 3 years ago. This fall left surgeons with the task of virtually reattaching Boyer's nose to his face. And whether in present or past tense, through the years, the pictures of the race across cobblestones have remained frighteningly similar. The specter of Paris-Roubaix and the lust of the best in the world to beat it has kept the fans ever present. To be the first to shed the cobblestones and hear the finish line roar in the Roubaix Velodrome means entering the history books alongside the legends in the world of cycling. And the modern-day heroes of cycling and favorites in today's race include American Greg LeMond. At 24 years young, he is already the finest American cyclist in history. In July, LeMond finished third in the 24-day Tour de France. 3 times he's entered Paris-Roubaix. He has yet to make it to the finish line. LeMond's training partner and teammate is Canadian Steve Bauer, who won Olympic silver medal in Los Angeles. Last year's Paris-Roubaix champion, Irishman Sean Kelly, one of the finest flat-out sprinters in the world. And the attention of the press here focused on the Italian cycling franchise, 3-time champion of Paris-Roubaix, Francesco Moser, at 32 years old, one of the oldest men in the race. While Moser is relaxed, LeMond is nervous.
How you doing, huh?
Good.
You set to go?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess.
Never finished the race before. What do you think your chances are this time?
Oh, they're as good as anybody's, but... yeah, as good as anybody's, but it's still, no matter what, it's difficult to finish. You have to have a lot of luck.
Quick description for me of Paris-Roubaix.
Hell of the north.
Greg LeMond and the best of the rest getting set for the start at Paris-Roubaix. The fans surrounding the starting line brave the miserable weather that always seems to show up on race day. If football fans in America are loyal, well then these cycling fans here in Europe are compulsive. Some of them have traveled since early morning just to glimpse the stars of cycling here, watch the start, and then dash back home to watch it live on TV. Forget the weather. This is Paris-Roubaix. The cyclists and the fans all know what to expect. So now, the greatest professional cyclists in the world set to meet this year's challenge in the Paris-Roubaix Bicycle Classic. We're getting set right now for the start, which is in Compiègne, just outside Paris. And Phil, it's windy, it's a cool 40 degrees, it's wet, it's been wet all week. The course is a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, John. It's the worst course I've ever seen. Talking with the riders this morning, the worst they've ever seen. But, John, I have a map right here in my pocket. By coincidence, you understand. No good Frenchman goes without a guide Michelin. And if you just give me a hand here, can you just hold the end? Because it's only a small map by some people's standards, but the whole of Paris-Roubaix is on it. And if we can just turn around here and put it on the car. And there we have, John, Paris-Roubaix on the bonnet of a car.
Paris-Roubaix is really not Paris to Roubaix. Although the race once began in Paris, in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, for years now, the cyclists have amassed for the start where Joan of Arc was captured and then later handed over to the British. Here in Compiègne, the cyclists leave a town that in 2 world wars has seen the surrender of both German and French troops. The first part of this race does not include the bothersome cobblestones. The roads are smooth and the scenery is beautiful. At the 40-mile mark, still no cobblestones as they roll through the industrial textile town of Saint-Quentin, the scene of a famous battle in 1557 when Spain's Philip II defeated the French. Out of Saint-Quentin, and another 30 miles of flat riding that soon turns to racing because the first set of cobblestones is on the way. The cyclists begin to sprint to the front as they approach the town of Salèche, because they all know being in the middle of a pack of 172 over cobblestones is just inviting a fall. It's here where many riders will crash and then be forced to drop from the competition. Those who make it to the 97-mile mark have won no prize. The Arenberg Forest is the next and largest obstacle on the roads to Roubaix. The competition through this corridor filled with huge muddy stones is more like survival than it is racing. The town of Roubaix in the distance would seem so close now. If you've been strong and lucky enough to put the forest behind you, that's reason enough to earn a badge of courage. But it will not guarantee you that you'll finish the race. Because 70 miles of racing now remain, and the rain-soaked cobblestones, the wind, and the frantic competition will strip more and more riders from their bikes and then set up the final race dynamics. The winner and those who complete this orchestrated madness reach the finish line in the Roubaix Velodrome near the Belgian border. Those who make it will hear the roar of the thousands of fans in the stadium who cheer winners and survivors of the world's greatest single-day bike race. 8 hours of racing, and the only constant? Most of the 172 cyclists will not finish this race. And so now it's time to point the bikes out of Compiègne. And the citizens who make their home in this historic battleground now watch athletes from 14 countries begin their own private battle to win a bicycle race. This is known as a rolling start, which is really nothing more than a parade for a few miles until the flag comes down for the race to officially begin. So the finest pros in cycling, including American Greg LeMond on the left, relax and wait for the start. And as the red flag comes down, the pace picks up. The race begins. And then right on cue, the skies open up and wet the stage for this bizarre drama in the hell of the North. "172 strong, but things will change soon enough." From their wreckage, the escapees break cadence only to avoid the mess and get back to business. Riders like Denmark's Kim Andersen, a teammate of American Greg LeMond, gets help from his support crew, accepts his fall, and decides to continue the ride. 5 other racers decided the beginning of this race should be the end. Back up ahead, the leaders with Bill Liggett.
2 hours into the race and life doesn't seem so bad after all. 167 riders still huddled together, perhaps for warmth, but hardly for comfort. Everyone knows what's ahead. And, depending on how strong you are, the wind is either good or bad. Rivals become uneasy partners, sharing the pacemaking so as to conserve energy. They rarely look at one another, because effort shown on the face might be remembered later. Support vehicles carrying enough equipment to open a bike shop are ready for the journey into hell. This is one race where the mechanics are as important as the riders. Ask any rider and he'll agree. It's a day when the support teams become men of stature or are sent home later in disgrace. For riders like Mark Gomez, there are early problems. A visit to the mechanic, though, is less painful than the dentist. A slight adjustment to his gears cures his problem, and the former French champion is ready now to rejoin the race up front. Well, maybe not.
Well, joining the race up front will mean catching these men. Each rider is on a team. On each team are domestiques, or helpers, hired just to protect their stars from the wind or to block or just provide a water bottle if it's needed. It's first-class treatment reserved for men like the former bricklayer from County Waterford, Ireland's Sean Kelly, last year's champion. On a rival team is another protected superstar, 32-year-old Francesco Moser. Teamwork has helped him win 3 titles in Paris-Roubaix. Both Moser and Kelly know that riding in the middle of the pack conserves your strength. Riding off the front early on, like these cyclists, burns valuable energy, which will be needed when all reach the first set of cobblestones. Riding on those stones ahead is a practiced art, and our Phil Liggett spent the day before this race demonstrating what it's like to trade smooth pavement for the cobblestones in the hell of the North.
Well, after 3 hours in the saddle, the riders have a right to a sense of security. But the road to Roubaix is still ahead, and so are the cobbles. Your body vibrates as if you've been thrown into a cement mixer. You now get down to the work in hand. You fight the cobbles, and you really feel the vibrations going right through the body, from your toenails to the hair of the roots on your head. This now is the hell of the North, and this, even for the most accustomed rider, The hard men of the north is Paris-Roubaix.
They may not ride it, these fans, but they know what it means. And that's why the French will always wait and listen along the cobblestones for these surgeons of cycling who must meticulously dissect their nemesis. Find them, these men, and you'll find brave athletes embracing l'enfer du Nord, the hell of the north. Here now the chase group entering the first set of cobblestones. Ahead of them, 10 minutes ahead, is Francis Castang in white, leading a small group that has broken away from the larger cumbersome pack of riders. Although riding at the front means bearing the full force of the wind alone, it is a safer way to enter these roads. And while Castang, the former French national champion, and his Pied Piper crew ride single file safely navigating disaster, the group behind has become a plodding mass of tangled tires and torsos. There's little room for company on these roads designed for 17th century foot soldiers. And each cyclist caught in this second group can only slow down and then hope for a chance to shed the others without triggering a landslide of bicycles. And so taking the cue and moving off the front of this pack is the young American, Greg LeMond, who is no stranger to falls in the cobblestones. And LeMond now leads the hounds in the hunt to find the lead group. At this point, a 10-minute lead is not insurmountable. Behind them all, more of what this racing leaves behind. The picture poses a question. Why would anyone enter this race? Early retirements in the race that forces the very best to hang it up. Paris-Roubaix, bonne chance, good luck.
Greg LeMond isn't interested in those who retire. The aggressive American at the front is anxious to prove to himself he can reach Roubaix for the first time. He attacks the cobbles with youthful abandon, keen to reduce the 7-minute deficit on the early escapers. The leaders are no longer an orderly pack. They are beginning to pay the price of aggression as, under heavy skies, their numbers dwindle. Behind, LeMond splits the field, showing clearly why he is seen as the greatest American rider. The boardman on the motorbike shows the time gap. Resigned to the inevitable, at least the leaders are still clean. And there's determination. It's still there. With race favourites all around him, LeMond wisely falls back to allow others to help in the chase to catch the leaders. No one rider can win all on his own efforts, and LeMond doesn't need reminding that there's still 4 hours to go. Bruno Wojciech comes alongside. Fittingly today, he's the son of a coal miner. At Valenciennes, it's feeding time, a welcome sight for the marathon men with 92 miles covered. To applause and cheers, the leaders, like mail trains, snatch bags of food. Next stop, Roubaix.
63 riders have now dropped from this race. And for each abandon, there is a story to match the picture of personal defeat. Some have been thrown from their bikes one time more than endurance will allow. But attrition in Paris-Roubaix is not joined by embarrassment. There is respect and applause for those who would dare pursue the course even this far. The spoils in the mad race across cobblestones, the bikes are carted off like so much antique hardware. And the athletes scooped up by a van known as the broom wagon, sweeping the cyclists away to the finish line while still leaving the badge of filth that will follow them into the shower room. Pack it all up and then put away the dreams of finishing Paris-Roubaix. And now, a full 7 minutes behind the lead group entering Valenciennes is the chase group. And they'll snatch up their meals like those before them. But their box lunch on a bicycle will be consumed now in the pouring rain. Riding along with them is a chance to experience firsthand the desperate yet almost comic ritual of catching supper and then racing a bicycle with both hands off the handlebars. And they'll need the food for strength, because as they leave the mining town of Valenciennes, ahead is the Arenberg Forest. It was here last year, in this narrow tree-lined corridor, where the race was decided as a horde of athletes bowed to the huge stones in crippling crashes. Already thousands of fans have gathered in the Arenberg today, braving the miserable weather to share the drama that approaches. They wait for the men who have hung on through the rain, the mud, and the staggering falls. Men like defending champion Sean Kelly, who last year conquered the Ehrenberg, and men like American Greg LeMond, who fell headfirst last year in the forest along with the rest of his team and had to drop from the race. This tour through hell would not be complete without the trip through the forest of Ehrenberg. Riders in the Paris-Roubaix Bike Classic, now in single file pointed toward the forest of Ehrenberg. And waiting there is my colleague Phil Liggett.
Well, on any normal Sunday afternoon, the forest of Ehrenberg really is quite nice. It's pretty, it's peaceful, and it's tranquil. But not so today, of course, because when the race gets here, the riders will have done already 100 miles. Everybody had heard of the forest a year ago because 70 riders crashed as they came into this forest. And those riders, of course, didn't finish the race. Others went on to win from this very point. And that's the reason for all these people today. They've come to see just what will happen in Paris-Roubaix.
And as the huge crowd lean forward, hoping to see a Frenchman ahead, they're not disappointed as Yvon Madio leads onto the evil stones of Arenberg, tailed by Theo de Roy of Holland. The remnants of the original escaping group fight to hang on. But disaster strikes as Madio punctures. Now you can see how important a mechanic is. That's when he's there. De Roy keeps working hard, knowing now that if he can clear this section of cobbles, there's a chance to shape the course of the race. Madio is left in the wings, still hoping. At 27, De Roy has the stamina, although he isn't seen as a potential winner. At this point, he could do with some help, and it's on the way. The cheers are for Madio, racing back to the front line.
Behind the leaders comes the chase group. And as they embrace the forest, the narrow passage now becomes clogged and confused with more riders. The road through the Ehrenberg too narrow for support cars to pass, so it's run with the spare parts, or just forget it. The cyclists call it the trench, and they'll tell you the only reason race organizers include it is to force head-first crashes. The chase group has now cut the time deficit to 5 minutes as the riders race while trying to engineer safe escape from the Ehrenberg. Escape artist, the Flying Dutchman, Theo de Roy, has long since left Ehrenberg, but has not shed too close behind. Yvon Madio and Henri Manders. Manders and Madio are from different teams, but will work together to catch the leader, de Roy. Behind those three, the front runners of the chase group can see dim light at the end of the dark forest corridor. Out of the Ehrenberg and into the town of Wallers, 101 riders have abandoned this race they call Paris-Roubaix.
And now only 71 riders are left. They include Greg LeMond of the United States, Sean Kelly, last year's winner from Ireland, whose face reflects life in hell. There's a greater urgency now as attacks come all the time. But this man, Theo de Roy, still leads after his attack in the forest. With still 60 miles to go, it seems madness that one man can face 2.5 hours into the wind alone. Really, de Roy needs some help, and a glance back shows him it's coming. It's Madio of France and Manders of Holland, and the Frenchman at the front has recovered well from his puncture. While these two conserve energy by sheltering each other from the wind, de Roy suffers up front. It's a strange alliance behind. De Roy came to this race as a domestique or helper to work for his team's stars, but now a chance to win. So he waits. It's a good time to take on food and let the help come to him. If you're wondering what he's drinking, so am I. No rider reveals his secret potions. It could be brandy. One thing's sure, it's not dope. The tests are too strict. The first rider to catch De Roy is Yvon Madio, another domestique who really is here to help his brother Marc, who's back in the chase group with Le Monde. With hardly a glance of recognition, the three join forces against a common enemy, the chasing pack. With some cobbles behind, but worse still to come, the three musketeers are placed now between the hell of the north and the devil behind. Presence on the road to Roubaix, that of Francesco Moser of Italy, one of the world's most accomplished riders. Moser seems at 33 to have found the elixir of youth, and to prove it, he sets off after Yvon Madio, the Frenchman who fought back into the lead after trouble in the forest of Arenberg. Madio still hopes to become only the second French winner since 1956. Just behind Madio are De Roy and Manders, but the two appear to be struggling now. De Roy shows his courage, but the wind has shown its strength. Le Monde, who hasn't yet seen the leaders, is not far behind. The mud of this particular battle has already found a home on the tunic of the American. His finest hour is perhaps still to come. But for the moment at least, attention swings to Moser, a potential winner as the man from Tuscany heads off in search of these three men. Surrounded by a flotilla of motorcycles, Moser, who has won this race 3 times before, relies on a vast experience. Now it is a race between a cagey veteran and a young pretender. De Roy, the hapless Dutchman, accepts a cruel fate in the form of a blown tyre. There are no niceties in hell. But the leaders continue as the cobbles unfold on an endless conveyor of pain. Madio and Manders speed on, barely daring to look back. They know that De Roy has gone, but do they know that the youthful legs of an aging champion is closing the gap at an alarming rate? Le Monde senses the race pattern is changing, and now he too has decided that the time has come to lift the tempo. The chase continues, and De Roy, a fighter it seems of his own private war, finds the willpower to come back to the front and join Yvon Madio. Behind them both, the great champion has just checked in. The bodies have been pounded now for more than 6 hours, and still the race is undecided. You may have noticed Manders has gone. The race has taken on a new look. There's now a chief among the Indians, and Moser, a former world champion, likes nothing better than to set a pace that he's proven in the past few can follow. Riders know this race is never easy, and it seems they accept that, well, if you're going through hell, you may as well make the trip worthwhile. There's always plenty more behind willing to follow in your wheel tracks. And although much of the race so far has been on smooth roads, the worst is still to come. So far, it's been the wettest Paris-Roubaix in years. Welcome to springtime in France.
race has now claimed neophyte Steve Bauer. Bauer, in his first Paris-Roubaix, turned professional after earning the road race Olympic silver medal in Los Angeles. And now the Canadian star who trains with and works for American Greg LeMond will find his seat in the broom wagon for a trip to Roubaix to watch the others who will finish. The door closes on Bauer in Mons-en-Pévèle. With 41 miles left, he becomes number 122 to abandon the race. Up ahead, the fight continues between the master and the young upstart. Francesco Moser leads Theo de Roy. And they travel through the muddiest patch of cobblestones thus far. Moser in white, de Roy in blue, and everyone in slip-sliding struggle to stay afloat. Behind the two leaders, the chase group, rounding that same muddy turn, less than a minute behind the Italian and the Dutchman. It's now been raining and sleeting off and on for the past 6 hours. The temperature has dropped to 35 degrees, and the competition has sparked the delight of the fans here who have paid not a dime to watch this magnificent mud circus. And in this chase group now rides Sean Kelly, the Irishman. Kelly in red, white, and blue here. And in the helmet, that's American Greg LeMond. With less than a 1-minute deficit off the leaders, each of the 44 remaining cyclists has a chance to take the race. And as they pass, those who have come to watch jump back in their cars to find the next patch of cobblestones.
So now the thousands of spectators here in northern France leave yet another muddy spectacle. Already 6 hours on the cobblestones here and another 40 miles left before they reach the Velodrome in Roubaix. And the big question is, can American Greg LeMond, a man who has never even finished this race, go on and win it?
Ask Gregory James LeMond what he thinks about during a long race in Europe, and he'll tell you, America. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy from Washoe County, Nevada, would certainly seem out of place on the roads of northern France. But the 24-year-old who first bought a 10-speed bike with money earned cutting lawns now calls Belgium his home. LeMond made the decision to leave home and train in Europe 3.5 years ago. The decision was a good one for Greg, who last July became the first non-European to finish in the top 3 in the grueling Tour de France bike race. Moving to Belgium meant moving the family. And now Greg's 1.5-year-old son, Jeffrey, watches Dad on TV at work on a bicycle. Greg's racing and 8-hour-a-day training leaves barely enough time for precious family life. But the family is always there behind him.
Where's Dada? Where's Dada?
If young Jeffrey is old enough to know the meaning of pride, he certainly has good reason to save some for Dad. In 1983, LeMond stunned the cycling world by becoming the first American to win the World Professional Road Race Championships. That win catapulted LeMond onto magazine covers with the likes of 4-time Tour de France winner, Frenchman Bernard Hinault. And now this American in Europe has attained superstar status he would never find in the States.
Financially, it's racing in America would be for fun, and I skipped college and I made a big sacrifice, and I went to Europe, and that's where you can make a living at cycling, and I made my choice to make cycling a career, and that's why I'm in Europe at this point.
He's okay. He's okay. Are you happier? You miss Daddy, huh?
And so Greg LeMond, an American in Europe, off to beat the European Masters in Paris-Roubaix.
Greg LeMond, who has 3 times failed to finish Paris-Roubaix, now chases a man who 3 times has won it, Francesco Moser, in white. With him, de Roy, the Dutchman, who doesn't know how to give up. It's just his partners who seem to change. Moser is a real challenger, and Italy's superstar really does want a 4th victory. What a record that would be. 4 wins, 2 seconds, 2 thirds. But the group behind is a select one and contains most of the fastest riders in Europe. In front, Moser suffers into a headwind, while behind, de Roy shelters on his inside. Riding like a veteran campaigner, LeMond monitors the moves. The reason? Because the bleak roads make it easy for the fugitives to be seen. Moser, dangling like a carrot on a stick, senses that the attacks are about to begin. He allows himself a look back. Belgian champion Eric van der Aarden takes up the chase at 23, 10 years younger than Moser. And Sean Kelly, as last year's winner, still wearing the number 1 with pride. There goes Le Mans too. But van der Aarden, showing amazing speed over the cobbles, streaks past Moser, reminding his elder that experience alone is not enough to create a recipe of success. Further back, De Roy finally succumbs, the gallant Dutchman. For 5 hours among the leaders, now knows success was always something of a dream. He's caught by Kelly, and Paris-Roubaix claims another potential star. Meanwhile, van der Aarden, wearing the jersey of Belgium champion, refuels his body. Now is his chance to be compared with Eddy Merckx, his fellow countryman and the greatest cyclist ever. So far, he hates such comparison. He won 300 races as an amateur, but he's still a long way to go as a pro. Anyway, Moser isn't finished yet. The Italian is back again. It forms a formidable tandem. As for Theo De Roy, I guess he's found John Tesh.
It's the ballast. It's the whole ballast. You're working like an animal. You're wet. You don't have the time to. You wet your pants and you're riding in mud like this and you're slipping and it's part of it. You mustn't think because otherwise you get mad.
Will you ever ride it again?
Sure, it's the most beautiful race in the world.
Thanks, Bill.
And so this most beautiful race in the world says goodbye to the man who for so long held its number 1 position. Theo De Roy off to Roubaix in his own private broom wagon.
So with American Greg LeMond just 45 seconds behind the leaders and with only 30 miles left, he must make his move soon. Because up front, Francesco Moser in the lead here now has to repel another attack from the brilliant van der Aarden. Try as he might, Moser suddenly hits a hole in the cobbles and once again a leader in Paris-Roubaix is down. The confusion behind, Moser looks for a mechanic. He seems completely confused. No one to help him, nothing for it but to run. As Moser runs, a mechanic tries to keep pace with him. The klaxons indicate that Le Mans and all the rest are coming up. A mechanic in panic is not a good one. Moser, showing experience, waits patiently, but 2 Renault team riders go clear. After all the work to make the gains, Moser now has to watch the losses come along. Rider after rider goes by as Moser remounts. The last one to come by, yes, Greg LeMond.
So the Belgian national champion Eric van der Aarden assumes the mantle of current leader in this race almost 7 hours old. Can he take the lead to Roubaix? Not without shedding the hungry wolves behind. Young French star and matinee idol of the cycling world, 24-year-old Marc Madio. And with him, a man 4 years his senior, defending champion Sean Kelly. Kelly wearing his goatee of filth for which he's become famous. And Greg LeMond is there too. Where do you look on these men of steel for a sign of weakness? Eric van der Aarden punches a hole in the wind alone at the front. His demeanor now one of almost panic as he senses the urgency of the riders behind. Over his shoulder, the wolves have begun to work together, taking turns at the front. Their common prey bears the name van der Aarden. There's Sean Kelly in the red, white, and blue. And number 127, Greg LeMond. Racing as allies will save them almost 60% of their effort. And that effort saved becomes van der Aarden's loss, as now he struggles in the lead against the winds of the north. Van der Aarden is greeted alone by the fans lining still another pathway choked with cobblestones. The chase group chewing up the Belgians' lead are only precious seconds behind now. On this cobbled straightaway, they can see the race leader. And now, Van der Arden knows his predators have worked their cruel magic all too well, as from above we see yet another would-be champion of Paris-Roubaix scolded by those who have learned it's just too early to make the escape to victory. And so Eric Van der Arden, wearing the colors of Belgium on his jersey, is consumed by the rest of the pack. Eric Van der Arden trades the lead for a place in the pack in the town of Sisson, 15 miles from Roubaix. It's clear now that the winner of this classic will come from within this group of 8 riders. Will it be Sean Kelly or the Frenchman Matteo? Or number 127, Greg LeMond? LeMond now taking his turn at the front. Who will strike first on the roads to Roubaix? After 150 miles of competition in the worst conditions imaginable, who could possibly have the strength to find one more sprint for a victory? The velodrome in Roubaix begins to fill with the thousands who will soon know the answer to that very question. Here's to win this race. But still, the youngster in front is fully aware of what's behind. And the farmer's son from Tipperary, Sean Kelly, possesses the most lethal sprint in the sport. And does Matteo know that on Kelly's shoulder is Greg LeMond? Maybe the devils behind have precipitated this madness up front. Matteo produces energy from deep within, and even through the layered mud on his face, can already taste the victory ahead. The other sprinters chasing must wonder why the Frenchman doesn't collapse as he puts more distance on them. Marc Matteo, who finished 9th in the Moscow Olympics before turning professional, has the greatest achievement of his career within grasp. And then the word comes to Matteo from the race car. If he can maintain an even pace now, the race will be for second place. That race will include LeMond and Kelly, who have been silent partners since the very beginning. Up front, Matteo accepts an unofficial victory in the form of a handshake from his coach, Cyril Guimard. LeMond has gone to a sprint to try and take a second, while Matteo makes the final turn towards the velodrome. And behind him, 6 riders in the town of Roubaix will decide second place. Matteo has entered the velodrome 400 yards from victory, while his French teammate Bruno Vochnek, the son of Polish immigrants, leaves the chase group. Vochnek, who lives only miles from Roubaix, tries to reach home in second place. Back in the velodrome, and Marc Matteo raises his arm to the now deafening crowd to watch a fellow Frenchman win this most prestigious crown. What they're about to find out, though, is that there'll be 2 Frenchmen on the rostrum, as here comes Vochnek. And as Matteo greets the crush of reporters, watch the race for third, LeMond and Kelly, joined by 3 other riders entering the velodrome. Avoiding the crash, both the American and the Irishman, LeMond and Kelly, ride briefly on the infield. And then, it's LeMond out in front of Kelly with only 100 yards left. Kelly on the left and LeMond right. And Sean Kelly's sprint forces the American into 4th place just at the line. Up on the podium, the man who recently won the heart of a former Miss France, Matteo, a cobblestone trophy held overhead, and now he and partner Vochnek winning the hearts of all of France. And with me, Greg LeMond, an historic American finish.
What an unbelievable race. Great finish. Thanks. Not good enough. I didn't have anything left. Oh, it's terrible.
Your first finish at Paris-Roubaix, what'd you think?
I was happy. I didn't crash, didn't flat, so I had some luck, but just didn't have enough at the final. Greg?
The worst cobbles we've seen, the worst conditions we've seen in some time. What was it like out there?
Really slippery, a lot of crashes, but it was the wind that really killed everybody. It really killed me because there was one section I got behind because of the mud, and to come back I had to fight for 5-6 miles in the headwind, and it just blew out my reserves.
Congratulations, Greg. And so the American, Greg LeMond bike racer, Greg LeMond family man, completes 7.5 hours through the cobblestones. 172 started, 35 reached the finish. The hell of the North has enjoyed a good day indeed. For Phil Liggett, I'm John Tesh.